Before we begin, I apologize for this video's generic and clickbaity title. Now that my channel is no longer just viewed by me and my alt account, I'm now with the whims of the YouTube algorithm and would like to not get demolished before I even get started on this platform. That said, welcome to part 1 of my devlog. I'm putting devlog in quotations because this will not be any different than my usual content, but I guess technically I always make devlogs, so I guess this is a devlog. Anyway, I've been learning game development, specifically VR game development, for quite a while now. I have a few games on my itch.io page, but I think I'm ready to take the next step. You know, maybe settle down, have a couple of kids, perhaps a dog. This joke sucks. By that, I mean I want a game up on Steam. With every game or video I release, I try to learn something different from it and get a new perspective. From years of playing Valve games, I picked up on the every game has to be something new aspect of their work. That's also probably why I take forever to release projects and never finish the cool ones. I'm still pissed off that Valve never did anything with their f-stop demo or really any of their IPs. So ever since playing Bone Lab, I had an idea of a time trial game with a physics-based player. I wanted the player to feel really cool and like take enemies out as quickly as possible, like a John Wick VR game. With that, I decided that this would be my first commercial release. And I mean, I know that like people whose job specializes in like marketing are probably gonna be like, you know, oh, your game should appeal to the wide consumer audience and not the niche little pocket that is VR. But shut up. This is my channel, and I like making things hard for myself. Starting off the project, I originally intended to make the VR player from scratch, as I did for the last video, but for the sake of not reinventing the wheel and for my sanity, I decided to go with a dedicated framework. If I made this player controller completely from scratch, this game would likely go the route of that FNAF fan game, and we know how that went. I have many VR frameworks in my asset library, but the one I chose was Hurricane VR with the Hexabody integration. Both of these assets were created by Cloudwalker, so Hexabody required Hurricane in order to function optimally, unless I wanted to code my own integration, and I can barely code a 2D character controller without watching a Brackeys tutorial. I also downloaded a Skybox pack and some prototype textures from the asset store. After getting all of the assets imported in my project, I brought in the player prefab, plugged in my index, and in the wise words of Todd Howard, I fucking broke everything. Nothing worked. I had recently learned what namespaces were and how to use them in Unity, and I accidentally added namespaces to every single class in my project. Since Hurricane VR uses its own namespaces and requires specific namespaces to work, every single script had an error. Thankfully, God had my back because I just spam Control-Z over and over again like an insane person, restarted Unity, and pressed the error notification in Rider 1,000 times, and suddenly, all the errors were magically gone. Nothing even happened with the undo shortcut. I was just trying things and hoping they worked, and they did. Now I can walk around in the shitty version of the Assassin's Creed loading screen. Once that little blunder was sorted, I started working on the enemy AI. I definitely could have used a framework for this too, since I own an AI framework that is compatible with Hurricane VR, but I would like to make this game myself, and also, as I said, I like a challenge. I probably should have used that asset in hindsight though, because the AI I wrote for this project really sucks and in its current state has a ton of bugs and issues, but I think I'm getting way ahead of myself here. I've mentioned it before, but writing code for AI is not my strong suit. However, who knows AI better than, well, AI. You know where I'm going with this. As of late, ChatGPT has taken over the tech space, and as someone terrified of AI and has seen Terminator at some point in my life, I think, I've always been hesitant about it. Despite my objections, I asked ChatGPT for AI code. I'm reasonably sure this code is abysmal and is the entire reason the AI breaks all the time, but where we are in the story, past me is entirely oblivious to the horrors future me will experience. After fighting with ChatGPT, which really wanted me to make a 2D game instead of a VR game, I got a chunk of code that somewhat resembled what I was looking for. Honestly, I think the AI might have been trying to tell me that making a VR game in 2023 is a bad idea, and I should probably go back to college, learn web development, get a cushy job at a tech startup that is likely to fail in 3 months, get paid less than a quarter of the founder's salary who bought a Tesla, worships Elon Musk and Gary Vee, and has no idea what React is beyond, oh, Facebook and Discord use it, and instead make a 2D platformer about depression. Unfortunately for it, I am stubborn and I'm stupid. After tweaking the code ChatGPT gave me, I had a working enemy that fired bullets at the player. I then brought in a gun to test that out. Luckily, Hurricane comes with a fully functional gun and even a tool to create my own guns in the future. Maybe after the game releases I'll add more, but currently a pistol should do. You'll be fine. What do you think this is, Boneworks? Pavlov? You think I'm Zach Chikalis Brown? We may share a first name, but that dude worked for Valve at 18. I'm 19 and still trying to figure out what the hell a vector is. I added some scripts to the enemy to take damage from the gunshots, which Hurricane also provided. Thank God I'm coding the enemies myself, because if I wasn't, I don't know if I could take the hordes of Twitter gamers calling me an asset flipper and saying my game lacks creativity, or even worse, comparing me to Yandere Dev. I may lack social skills like him, but at least I don't own a body pillow or make a game that sexualizes underage girls, and I also finish and release my games when I say I will. Now that I had an enemy, I started getting a health system for the player. I created a player health script and wrote some temporary code to restart the scene if the health reaches or goes below 0. I ended up putting this script on the game manager game object because of how Hexabody controls the player. Instead of having just one central player object that moves around the scene, there are a bunch of game objects all controlled by each other. Due to this, I can't just have one object that takes the collision, it would have to be all the different objects that make up the player. To remedy this, I tagged all the objects with the player tag, and whenever the bullet collides with anything, it checks if it has that tag. Since multiple objects now have that player tag, I can't just search for the player health script using that tag, as it will just return a no reference exception. So onto a separate object it goes, and whenever it needs to access the health, it just looks for the game manager instead of the player. Now that most of the main mechanics are in, I started blocking out a test map. I used Pro Builder in the prototype texture pack I mentioned earlier to get a level in place quickly. Unfortunately for me, doing this unlocked a massive oversight on my part. How I was doing the enemy code was that it was looking in all directions for the player within a given radius. If it saw the player, it would just look at them and start firing. Did you notice the massive problem with what I just described? The issue is that no matter what, the enemy will start shooting as long as the player is within that radius. That means the enemy will start shooting if the player is behind a wall, hell, multiple walls, yet still inside that attack distance. I needed to implement a way for the enemy to shoot only if the player was within line of sight. The way to do this was with something I dreaded to learn. Raycasts. Not because they're complicated, but because there's so much you can do with them. I just get overwhelmed and scared and hide under the covers like a child. Raycast is my nightmare animatronics, and Unity is my William Afton. I added a raycast out from the center of the enemy towards the player and checked if it hit. If it did, it meant there was a line of sight, and it would start shooting and doing the rest of the attacking logic. Well, herein lies another problem with how Hexabody handles the player in my little tag fix. Hexabody has a force grab feature like Boneworks, and they do that by using long capsule colliders that extend past the hands. Those things. I don't feel like editing anymore. Unity's raycast works by looking for collidable objects. Can you see where I'm going with this? While the raycast was going towards a player, if you position your hands so that those colliders will be blocking the ray, it would stop the raycast from seeing the player. Now, you can change the raycast check to only look for a specific layer mask, but that wouldn't work because the colliders would still block it. I needed a way to exclude a particular type of object so that invisible colliders wouldn't stop a raycast. After a bit of Googling, I discovered layer mask bit shifting and the this operator. To be completely transparent, I have not got a single clue on how any of this really works. I just copied code from one place to another and got a result that I was happy with, and that's pretty much all programming really is. Real talk, I used to work at a place that taught kids how to make video games and code and all that, and some of them actually discovered this channel, which is super sick. I used to say that programming was professional Googling, and that it's not a big deal if you still code as long as you do it ethically and have the right to do so. We as programmers aren't going to remember every single aspect of C# or even know how to make something as simple as a character controller off the top of our heads. As much as coding elitists may yell at you for using libraries, or game dev snobs will be up in arms over using an asset from the Unity asset store, I've learned as long as people are having fun, nobody's getting hurt, you're correctly attributing your work if you need to, and the people who need to get paid are getting paid, making your life easier is not a crime. But then again, I'm a dumb Starbucks employee who types on a keyboard for 2 hours before watching YouTube until 1 AM, so what do I know? I implemented the layer mask fix, and then the raycast can now pass through those colliders. Before finishing up this janky test map, I got to work on the timer functionality. This is a time trial game. Without an actual timer, it's just a trial. I added another script to the game manager object to track how long the player spent on a given level. This script uses the time span data type and a text mesh pro text object and just combines the two. I don't know what a time span is. I followed a tutorial for it. Now it's level design time. Even a test map made me want to rip my hair off my scalp. I finished blocking out the map and added the enemies where I wanted them to be. Pro Builder made my life much easier, especially with the auto scaling UVs. Still, the best part was that every time I moved a new object where I wanted it to be, Unity decided the position should have a bunch of decimal places for, I don't know, shits and giggles. I personally think Unity just loves to kick me while I'm down. After all of that was in place, I wanted to get a start on the art pass. When I started this project, I wrote a game design document to keep my ass on track since I seem to have a hard time keeping feature creep and burnout at bay. When I wrote the GDD, I specified I wanted a black, white, and red art style with a more low poly simplistic look similar to Superhot. In fact, Superhot was a primary inspiration for the enemy models, which you'll see in a bit. I made all of the walls black, the player's hands completely white, and the prototype enemies red. When I changed the color of the enemies, without knowing, I made them resemble a certain astronaut figure with some dubious qualities. With the game's general look forming, I needed some way for the objects to pop out more. Since the gun was black and so were the walls, it was hard to see it. To fix this, I made an outline shader. I'm still completely new to shaders, so I followed this tutorial on how to make it using the shader graph, and it worked really well. I'm honestly super happy with how it turned out, and it complemented the art style way better than I expected. So I put a version of it on every single object I could. Now it's time for the one thing I'm always dreading for every new project. Enemy designs. Thank God I had thought about this way ahead of time because I already knew what the enemies were going to look like. I bought a bunch of low poly humanoid models from Sketchfab, thank you to Clockwork Animation. I sent the one I wanted through Mixamo for rigging and plopped it into my Unity project. After an ungodly amount of debugging and troubleshooting, just trying solution after solution, I reached the point where the enemies were now shooting at the player again. It turns out my code was so tailor-made for the bean I had been using as the enemy that everything stopped working once I changed the model to something more humanoid. The enemy was shooting itself, the bullets weren't moving towards the player, the raycast, for some reason, wouldn't even look towards the player. A lot of things broke. Even as I'm writing for the script for this video and filming, I still have a lot of work to do to get everything running optimally. With that being said, this video has gone on long enough, and a lot more work is needed on this project than I can fit into one video. I promise this will not be like the FNAF-inspired game where I make one video and then cancel the game because I'm bored. I didn't take that much from Valve. I do plan on finishing the game, and as it stands, all I have left is level design and final polishing, so expect that in the next video or so. I appreciate the tremendous support everyone's been giving me lately on these videos. I know I say in every video now, still, each surpasses the last one, so I feel it's necessary to repeat. Thank you guys. Follow my Twitter for progress updates. I'll see you soon with a follow-up. I'm Osiris. Goodbye. Okay. Video over. Video over. Video over. Video over. Video over. I'm gonna go play Spider-Man Miles Morales now.